Hello, and welcome to AFI DOCS 2020 presented by AT&T. My name is Malin Khan, and I am a programmer with the festival. Before we begin, I need to thank all of our sponsors, particularly our presenting sponsor, AT&T, our AFI members, as well as you, the audience. Thank you for being here and watching. You should have all just seen the incredible and empowering documentary, The Dilemma of Desire, directed by Maria Finitzo, and I am so happy to have her here with me today, along with some of the wonderful subjects from the film. This is really such a special film, and it is about so much more than just misogyny in our culture, but it actually addresses the how and the why with such beautiful complexity. Beginning with the concept, the denial of female pleasure, your film really opens up some insightful conversations about the ways in which women have to battle all of the forces that ask us to adapt to patriarchy, have to battle this inclination to internalize misogyny and accept the slew of microaggressions that are just thrown at us in our everyday lives. But you all, all of these subjects here, you're not standing for it, and it is so inspiring to see. And more than just not standing for it, your art and the relationships that you've cultivated with others, the way you live your lives has really become kind of an unwitting educational campaign, beginning with what feels like it's such a personal battle and extending it to other women to know that, we don't have to stand for it either. So it's really so beautiful, and it's such a powerful film, and we are so happy to be able to include it in the program. Thank you so much for being here. Before we begin, I would love to just go around the virtual room and have us introduce ourselves.
I'm Maria Finitzo, and I'm the producer and director of Dilemma of Desire, and I'm really happy to be here today.
I'm Rebecca Baruc. I'm one of the subjects. Hi, I'm Sunny, one of the subjects.
I'm Sophia, one of the subjects.
I'm Umnia, also one of the subjects.
And I'm Jasmine, also one of the subjects.
Thank you all so much for being here with this film and for the work that you do. I want to just start this question with Maria, asking you how you kind of came to this concept. It's such an interesting tack to take this biological and anatomical perspective on misogyny. How did the origin of the film begin for you?
So the film began quite a long time ago when I read a book by Daniel Bergner, who's a really excellent writer, called The Science of Female Sexual Desire, What Do Women Want? And he went around the country and interviewed scientists who were studying female desire with, unusually, with women as subjects. And that in itself was sort of unusual. And the whole upshot of the book was, at the end of the book, after he talked to all of these scientists, women have as robust a sex drive as men. They're simply told lies about it to reinforce patriarchal structures. And I remember when I got to that conclusion thinking, well, that's just great. Women have as robust a sex drive as men. Now, what are women supposed to do with that information? Since none of us are free to behave the way we really want, that there are a lot of things that get in the way of us having agency over our desire. And so I decided it would be a great way, that question, what are women supposed to do with this information, was sort of the beginning of my exploring how to turn this into a film. And what really launched the whole project was when I found Sophia Wallace's work, first on the internet, and then a couple years later went and met her. And all of her work, but certainly Cliteracy, the 100 Natural Laws, was such a good guide for me, and is, of course, the thematic structure of the entire film.
And did you begin with it as the thematic structure, or did it kind of envelop the film in different ways?
So when you begin a film, you have absolutely no idea where you're going. Mm-hmm. And I liken it a lot to throwing a huge net out to fish. You bring in all kinds of fish, and then you sort of say, no, we don't really want that. We don't want that. No, lobster's not what I'm looking for. But you have to gather a lot of material before the film starts to emerge. And so while I always loved Sophia's work and knew it had to be a part of the film, because certainly she was such a major part of the film, it took us, my editor and I, Liz Carr, at least a year and a half of editing before we finally made the structure work, and made it work as a film. So it was certainly something I thought about, but it took a long time before it happened.
And Sophia, could you speak to what it was like to be pulled into this project?
It was exciting. I just from the very beginning, Maria was so thoughtful in the way that she was approaching the subject matter. So that for me was really, really exciting, because I knew that whatever she made, it was going to be worthwhile. And there's so much that needs to be done to do justice to female pleasure, female desire, female embodiment, and in terms of like visual narrative as well. So I was like, yes, great. This is fantastic. I knew it was a great opportunity. And then I also knew what kind of uphill struggle that Maria was going to have, because it's not easy to make art about this subject matter. So I was like, okay, welcome, but also good luck to you. So.
Now, I know this project took quite a long time to make, and you mentioned just the editing process now. Were there any roadblocks in terms of trying to get the project funded or pulling it together as a film?
There were all roadblocks to get the project funded. In the beginning, I will blame myself for not describing it well enough or describing my vision for the film, but there was a great deal of resistance to embracing a film which was said that women deserve to know the truth about their anatomy and where their pleasure comes from. And even using the word clitoris people were like, no, oh God, please don't say that word again. And so I didn't get funding for the film for a very, very long time. And not oddly enough, but interestingly enough, the two major funders of the film are both men. And I remember pitching it once to a woman who really loved the project, but she said to me at one point, after I had blabbed on and on about the film, I don't know how I can pitch this to my bosses. And I remember, because they were men, and I remember being sad that I hadn't really given her the language that she felt comfortable using to make an argument for the film. So it took a long time for people to embrace the fact that this wasn't a film about pornography, because it was about women and sexual pleasure, because that's what happens. That gets relegated to porn. And there's still been some of that resistance to that. But now, now that the film is out there, people are really, really, really want to see it.
And I'd love to take the opportunity now to address the rest of the subjects here. You're all from such diverse backgrounds and you're doing such different things in your lives. How did you become involved in these projects, if we could just kind of go down the line?
Actually, me and Sunny have a mutual friend who kind of was involved with Cartem Quinn and invited us to this open discussion night with a director who was doing this film about female sexuality and desire. I actually think the prompt was just like a bunch of female identifying folks are going to talk about sex, dating, and what it's like to be in your, sexual life. And I was like, hell yeah. So a group of us went, and it was a very eye-opening experience and something I had never experienced. A group of 30-something women and femme-identifying folks being completely candid about sex and pleasure and all these things that I had never really talked about with other kind of growing adult folks.
So yeah, as Becca said, we went together as a group, and it was really wild for me. And I know, Jasmine, we've never actually met, but I actually remember you very distinctly from that. Because of how eloquent you are about all these things that I've never even really thought about, because I didn't know it was something I could or should think about. And so that immediately attracted me to the project. And I feel so lucky that I got to be a part of it.
I met Diane Kwan at a friend's film screening, and we got to talking, and she had just started working, or they were just about to have this gathering. And we just got into a conversation, and she was like, she just invited me and told me I had to come check this out and check out Maria's work. And I didn't know what to expect, but I went to this gathering, and Maria showed the trailer that they had at that point with Sophia Wallace's work. And then there was a circle of all these women sharing stories. And it was one of those things where I just thought, like, when does this when do we get to do this? How, where we get to, like, some of these things are like they're not secrets, but they're usually just so under wraps, and you're out here just trying to be proper all the time and be professional and all this stuff. But this was like an actual invitation to having these conversations very seriously. And so afterwards, I immediately was like, Maria, just contact me somehow. I don't know. And yeah, so it was sort of how it happened.
I also came to that thing. My friend invited me. She was just like, hey, I heard about this thing. Like, I don't remember how she knew you, Diana. But
I knew her through a friend.
yeah. Or Maria, sorry. But yeah, she was like, go, like, it'll be fun. And then I came, and I had just done like a promo for a short film I was in. So I was wearing like crazy makeup, and I was wearing like a fur. And it was really, really cool, like, watching it, and I thought it was really awesome. And then we just all got into that huge discussion, and it was like, I personally in my life like have a very open way of speaking with me, between me and my friends. So like, I'm used to having those type of conversations because I work in the sex industry, so that's what's normal for me. So it was really interesting being like surrounded by people where that wasn't like a thing that like is talked about in candid conversation like on a very regular basis. So it's just interesting seeing like a lot of different people's perspectives and like how it affected how we all still had like the same experiences despite the fact that we all like treat sex differently. So I wanted to be involved. It was a really, really cool project, and I was like very excited to write my name down on that paper.
Umnia, you touched on this a little bit, the kind of rarefied experience of women getting together and telling these personal stories. Did it come naturally to all of you to get to expose yourselves in this way, to talk about your personal lives, or was there kind of an element of trust building?
I mean, I think just in that room, that first time, I was like kind of on the edge of my seat and very like eager to hear what everyone had to say, and then felt very emboldened to share my most vulnerable experiences and thoughts. And then throughout the process of making the film, it definitely was a trust building thing, although from the get-go, I felt passionate and excited to be part of the project and felt that lending like my slice of life and my vulnerability was gonna help other folks watching kind of like set them free in the way that I felt like, oh, once I got part of this conversation, I'm learning constantly. But I think all throughout, Maria was very intent about building trust and communicating in ways that let us feel as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, I definitely was very uncomfortable at the beginning, and I honestly don't think I even had the language to express what I could express towards the end of the film, which is in huge part due to Maria and everyone else involved for guiding me through that. I remember after the first initial meeting, I was just chatting to my friend, and I was like, should we do it? Should we go buy a vibrator? Like, that's where I was at in my life. And so I'm very grateful for building these relationships and helping myself grow as a person through this process.
So being involved in the film is what prompted you to buy a vibrator?
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
The next weekend.
And what about you, Sophia? Did you have any element of trust building in terms of showing your art in this way or making sure it was represented properly?
Yeah, I think that's an important part of documentary practices, but I was so honored that Maria wanted to spotlight my work. I mean, I felt like that was a huge gift to me. And I think I was really excited that someone of Maria's generation wanted to tell the story in a younger context, because I feel like there's so many feminist movements that like emerge and then don't stay connected with each other. And it's not like this work is new, right? This actually isn't new work at all. It's just that we haven't been in a position to, print our stories and make our films and build our sculptures and build our architecture and all this shit. It's not like we didn't have the ideas, So I was just thrilled that this bridge was happening between generations to make this work. And to me, that's part of what makes the film you know, vital and radical and like so potent.
I really felt similarly to that too, because, you know, I'm an elder millennial. I'm not quite Gen X. I'm turning 40 this year. And for me, it was hard I thought it would be easier to get into these conversations, but every time I would film with Maria and just throughout the process the last few years, I realized that maybe I've been a little bit sheltered comparatively to some, you know, how the generations are now, sort of like on, you know, Instagram, Gen Z and whatever. But like, so part of me felt like, is there even any point? I think I would always end up asking Maria, is there any point to me? Because it seems like people are over, like, to some degree, it seems like the new kids are, you know, out here and they're feeling really free, and I feel like a bit of a relic, and it was that, I think that was one of the most incredible parts of it for me, was realizing that this is actually it's not over yet. It's barely even begun. And so much of how we express ourselves, it's, you know, can be there's such external elements, like she was saying earlier, where sexuality is then suddenly thrown into porn or thrown into exploitation. And there's all this room here that we have to sort of take up space. And that generationally, that we are part of this process where, like, my mom and my grandmother, all these women, like, we're all part of a longer narrative that's like gone on since the beginning, probably, of time, where we have been trying to stake our claim on our power, our pleasure, you know, all of these things. So it was definitely a process, like, to really start to realize how powerful it is within each of us to take our actions and to feel, you know, empowered, and how that will have a ripple effect.
In regards to like building trust, for me it was interesting because I wasn't out as a sex worker before we started filming. Like, my friends knew I wasn't being secretive about it, but only my mom and my family knew. Like, no one else in my family knew. And so I like gradually became like more comfortable with like myself as like a person who takes my clothes off for money. And like that is a part of like me as a person, through like filming this, and became like more comfortable with like saying that and not really caring about like what other people thought about it, which was it really helped me become the person I am today, because now I am fully out. The majority of my family knows. The ones that don't know are the ones that choose not to know. And I prefer my life like this. And I definitely think that putting a camera in my face and forcing me to talk about it, it definitely helped me become more comfortable with who I am, and like talking about my sexuality and my work in the sex industry. It definitely made it more of a comfort zone for me than it might have been previously.
One of the things in the film that really kind of hits you is seeing this montage at the end of all of you women at the beginning of the film and then at the end of the film, and how you've grown so much and changed so much. Maria, what was it like for you to kind of watch these people change and become and grow?
Well, that's probably one of the best parts about being a filmmaker, is that, first of all, I get to meet people I wouldn't normally meet, and then I get to establish a relationship with them. And it's not a one-way street. I mean, you get to see them grow, but I changed and grew a lot as well in knowing them. And certainly, I mean, I joke when I say that the first time I actually saw what my clitoris look like was when I met Sophia Wallace, and she showed me what it looked like. There was the picture there. And so it's a two-way street. And what was wonderful for me, and you don't know this when you begin a film, you don't know how it's going to go, was that I like to make films that I'm always looking for a reason to get hopeful, right? Always. And so I wanted the film to deal with serious issues and with all of the stuff that women have to face, and it's painful and it's horrible, but I also wanted the film to end on a hopeful note. And what was so lovely was to see how all of the women in this film were all, because that's just the resilience that they have, were all moving on in their lives in ways that were hopeful. And so I was able to say, okay, this is how I'm going to end this film. Yes, this is what happens. Yes, it's horrible, but we're not victims. We've already, that story's told a lot. We can be human beings in touch with our power and the possibility for all of our lives to be fully realized.
And you do really cover so many different elements of how this affects the daily lives of women. Were there any topics or subjects that you wanted to include that you ultimately were not able to?
There were wonderful stories, for instance, that I know Becca told me, and Sunny, and I think also Jasmine, and then another one of the people in the film, T. Chang, told me about their first sexual experience, right, when they were younger. And I loved those stories because I think they revealed so much about what the struggle is for women, right? And I couldn't find a way of getting them in the film, right? Yeah. So there were so many moments like that where we just didn't have enough time, right? We couldn't get that in the film. One of the subjects, Koryama, who's unfortunately not here, I was able to sort of show a relationship that she had with her partner, Dolan, and it's a really lovely part of the film. I would have welcomed an opportunity to do that with anybody else, but nobody wanted to share their boyfriends with me. So I don't know why, but they didn't. But I was really, there's just every time I got together to film with any one of the women that you see before you, I got so much incredibly wonderful, rich material that it was sad that I couldn't include all of it in the film.
Yeah, I want to go back briefly to the subject of art in the film, and we have Sophia's art, of course, kind of framing it and structuring the film, but then kind of gradually you introduced that these other women are artists as well. If anybody wants to kind of speak to art and activism in your life and how each kind of informs the other.
I think the dilemma of desire entering my life completely influenced the direction of my art. I mean, the most specific example is, just because it was so much of what I was thinking about and processing, I ended up painting a lot of self-portraits with these themes in mind, and actually exhibited them at the Museum of Surgical Science in Chicago, which was such a perfect setting because it's like an anatomical setting versus, it's just like a factual thing. And I ended up engaging over like 100 adults in an exercise where I asked them to draw the clitoris. I just had like a whiteboard and pen, and it was a very wild experience seeing full-grown adults be like, ugh, like just very nervous, even with their own like intimate partners, or like just kind of tripped out about the question. And lots of people couldn't draw it. In fact, there's literally one person who could draw it anatomically. And that just blew my mind and like really revealed to me kind of like what Umnia was saying before, and what we're saying about like generations. And we think maybe people are awoke to it or understand, but still like a huge mass public don't understand what this film is talking about, which is like there is an invisibility to the clitoris and its anatomy and the impact that has on our culture. So that's a specific example of how I kind of started taking action and shared my work and started those conversations. And it's like the most invigorating thing to be like, yeah, like we don't understand something, and there's like a lapse in our culture, and we should be talking about it.
I guess I wouldn't call myself an artist, but I did do some stand-up, and that did make it into the documentary. And that was super inspired by what we discussed in the documentary. And I actually have this whole joke about trying to find the clitoris. And I remember going to all these open mics where it was like me and 20 white dudes talking about finding my clitoris. And just no laughs, really, very minimal laughs. I was like, okay, I guess I'm not funny. And then I have a very distinct memory of going to an open mic for women of color, where I actually ran into Umnia. Yeah. And it went over very well. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm funny to women or people who get what's going on down there. And I think that was super illustrative to me of the importance of art and its ability to open up conversations in a way that you don't in normal interactions with daily people around you.
Art is, I think, a really useful tool because it's creating something new, and it's a creative gesture that is offering the world hopefully some sort of insight or something that's valuable that didn't exist before, and is positive in the sense that it exists. It's not just like an argument or just a fight against. It's just some like new productive like entity. And I think for something like sexual relations and the way they're entrapped in like racist, patriarchal, homophobic, et cetera, like having art as a way to intervene for me was so helpful. I really like kind of not being like a sex expert and just making work and making shit that says solid gold clit. You know, like what does that even mean to a world that like doesn't even know what a clitoris looks like, never sees the word clit in like bold print, would never put it in a really nice gold sans serif like on a wall. You know, it's something, there's so many layers to the rules about like who's allowed to feel proud of their body, who's allowed to be in public space, or whose body is like too embarrassing to be in public space unless it's clearly like sexually available to please certain powerful entities. And you know, to that point, like if you think about like a lot of the representations in the statuary of women, it's young women standing in as you know, virtue or Lady Justice, or you know, and usually an anonymous woman. It could be, you know, she's like the every woman, she's not an individual, and so our bodies are used all the time to like represent these concepts, but like when we actually try to like tell the story of our own bodies, we're censored, we're silenced, we're shut down. So and it's illegal, right? It's like still illegal to say the word vagina in a debate. Apparently, like, you know, women have actually gotten shut down when they were trying to defend abortion rights because they used the word vagina. So it's incredibly necessary, and I feel like through art, it's one of the best ways to say, hey, like what's possible, you know, instead of like what are the problems, but like what is this like new frame that we can offer, and maybe like get outside of like this trap of like debating whether she's a slut or not. Like, why don't we talk about if he's illiterate, he sucks in bed, like no one should ever sleep with him, for example.
Yeah,
Did you just say the word illiterate?
I know. I wondered if that was new or if it was.
That's the best word I've ever heard in my life.
Real talk. I always had this thing since I was very young to be a writer, and in my 20s, I was writing a lot, but I was not sharing it, and because a lot of it was about sexuality, and it was just what was coming out of me. But it was about my sexuality and just you know, sensuality and intimacy and ideas around that in fictional and poetic form. But I never even thought about publishing it, and I was like, how will I ever do this? And I don't know why I didn't just use a pseudonym. But at that time, there was a couple of things. It was like, well, what if my family finds out that I'm writing and then they read this? Or what if 30 years from now I want to run for office and then they're like, but you used to write about this and women's things. And so all these like ideas that I had in my mind that I didn't really, what I did was to sort of clamp it down and just keep it for myself. And so a lot of this process through even the filming and relearning about this and my relationship to myself and my body and cliteracy, was sort of like coming back to being like, hey, yes, why are we not, why are we told we can't talk about it? Like, why is it so taboo? And why are you suddenly then like some razor-edged feminist that's like, you know, sort of, then you're like kept in, like, you have to stay on that side because you're just like you're too feminist or too out there, you know. I don't know, it's just the idea that you have to sort of walk this middle line, at least that I sort of fell into that. So for me, you know, yeah, I've been like just doing more stand-up, more public talking about this kind of thing, and just getting my voice back, essentially, to be able to like just be able to say these things, because I think that we really have to. It's really important for women and men, for people who identify in many different ways that people come to identify, and to be able to speak about who they are, and you know, it's like we all share this, so why are we hiding it?
I think for me, I've always just been attracted to like erotic dance and like exhibitionism, and I grew up in the Bible Belt, so like not okay, just categorically not okay. So it's been a thing that I've like become more comfortable with over time. But for me, burlesque was definitely just, it was me being able to like find an outlet for my like creative energy that I couldn't really use when I was working, because as much as I would like to be able to dance to all of my favorite songs at the club, it's just unfortunately like they don't make the crowd happy. The stuff I want to dance to isn't the stuff normally that like makes a strip club really enjoyable for most patrons. So for me, burlesque was an outlet for a part of me that I couldn't use to make money, but that was still a very large part of me. And it gives you a different type of rush, and it really like, it's so interesting like how stripping is really taboo, but burlesque is like almost lauded as this like beautiful art form, where I would say that I'm not even going to say that they are very similar. I'm going to say that I've encountered many strippers who are also burlesque dancers and vice versa. So the skills like are very common and they go hand in hand. But it's interesting like how if you say you're a burlesque dancer to someone, they might be like, oh wow, that's so cool. But if you tell that same person you're a stripper, it's oh, and they're like clutching their boyfriend.
Yeah.
So it was like me finding something that I could do that I was like, that I really enjoyed, that was like a sort of form of expression, but then also having to take into account the fact that it's more palatable for people and why that is.
Yeah, I just want to say, because you mentioned dancing to unconventional songs, the Black Hole Sun dance that you have is so wonderful in the film. And Maria, unfortunately, we're all in this situation right now where we're sheltering at home. But this film was originally supposed to have premiered at South by Southwest, and then it was supposed to have played in Cleveland. So it's kind of obviously, you know, thrown a wrench into the festival world and so many other things. Have you had any responses from sharing it kind of more on a personal level? And are there any plans to get your film out to like younger women?
So, you know, after South by Southwest canceled, everybody went into a deep depression for a good 6 weeks. And then you have to get over it and you have to figure out what to do next. And so the kind of the order of things for a film is get it out in festivals, right? As many people as you can. And so that's the first step that we're doing. But we were also very, very lucky, and I hope this continues, that we were able to get a small grant from a donor to hire an impact producer. And she came on, her name is Shelby Knox. She came on the film before South by Southwest, and so we started planning all of this. And then when, of course, the world changed and now everything is digital, we just switched our focus as to how we would reach men and women audiences in the digital realm. And so our hope, of course, is that this film will screen at college campuses all over the country. And my hope is also that it screens at high schools as well. And so part of the outreach of the film is creating materials, outreach engagement materials with our advisors and our partners, people who are experts in talking about this, so that teachers and community groups and book groups and you name it can use this film. I mean, one audience we want to reach is, I'm in a book group with women my age. And when I told them I was making this film, they were shocked. And one of them said, I can't say the word clitoris. And I said, well, you just practice, say it in a sentence, complete sentence every day, 5 times a day, you'll get over that. But I think there's a lot of women my age, these are professional women, right? Who grew up with the shame around their bodies, and they want to get over that as well. And so we want to be able to offer this film to book groups, right? So instead of a book group, you're going to watch this film and you're going to talk about it. And also, getting together material so that mothers can talk to their daughters. One of the things that struck me after I met Sophia for the first time was that I hadn't told my daughter she had a clitoris. Now, maybe that's not the conversation she would have wanted to have to me. Now, of course, we have. But I hadn't done that either. And so I think a lot of women want to be able to talk to their daughters, regardless of how old they are, because I believe that if you have knowledge of your body, that changes the choices you make. It empowers them, and girls and women will make choices about when they're going to be sexual and how they're going to be sexual if they know where their own pleasure comes from. And so, that's another part of the outreach, is to try and get this film into the hands of absolutely everybody.
And if anybody is watching this on our site, are there any organizations you can recommend, or websites or social media where they can get involved?
So the film has its own website called thedilemmaofdesiredoc.com. And we also have a Facebook page under Dilemma of Desire, and we'll start kind of putting out more and more information. The outreach and engagement plan is just in the early beginnings, and so we are just starting to kind of figure it all out. One of the things we're having is we're starting to have subjects from the film, and I hope to have everybody in the film do this, get together with one other person in the film that they haven't met and have a conversation on Zoom. So now that we know we are all experts on Zoom, we're going to start using Zoom. And the first one that's going to happen is, Lisa Diamond and Koriyama. They're going to have a conversation, and then Becca and Stacey Dutton are going to have a conversation. And so everybody in the film will be paired with somebody else to talk about different issues in the film. Sophia's work was going for a cultural sea change. She changed the way we gave us all language to talk about this. And I hope this film is a cultural sea change for this country.
Yes, I definitely think it's such a powerful film, and I know it will affect a lot of people. So I just want to close out this conversation by just thanking you all for being involved and for the work that you do. And thank you so much, Maria, for making this film. We're so pleased to have it be a part of the festival.
Well, thank you. We're thrilled.
Thank you.
Thanks.